whether you think the case you've got is too complex, too deep, too difficult, whether you think that you're not going to be able to communicate well enough, the need to, to attend regularly, whether you don't feel you're confident enough to even attract people, all those things.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just things pulled out of the hat, if you like, but they are challenges that people have to live with when they're practicing. So if you've had an experience of being challenged when you're when you're training,
yes,
it at least sets you up.
I love this quote. We don't see how things are, we see things as we are.
Yes.
And that's really the nub of it. And it's just like saying, talking to graduates, this was always about you. This was always about your transformation. Because if we know who we are, then you can help other people see who they are.
Vulnerability is a superpower, but we're encouraged to believe it's kind of equivalent of failing. And it's a really important part of healing.
Absolutely.
And we need to kind of bring that back to...
Hi, homies. It's Marcus Fernandez here, founder and director of CHE, the Centre for Homeopathic Education. After 5 years of releasing a brand new podcast episode every single week, Eugenie is taking a well-earned break and has kindly asked me to look after the show and spend some time with you all. Over the coming weeks, I'll be bringing you some inspiring conversations with guests from across the homeopathic world and beyond, along with the occasional tasters from our CHE Pro membership library, what many of our members affectionately call the Netflix of homeopathy. Whether you're a seasoned practitioner, a student, or simply someone who loves homeopathy, I hope these episodes leave you informed, inspired, and reminded of the incredible potential of this medicine we all care so deeply about. So thanks for joining me. And now let's get on with today's episode. Hi, everybody, and welcome to today's podcast and my special guest, Maggie Dixon. Maggie's been a practicing homeopath for over 26 years. And in 2006, she founded the Green Park Natural Health Clinic in Bath here in the UK. But she's now relocated back to London, where she continues to run a very busy practice. Maggie has practiced at Ainsworth Pharmacy since 2015 and remains one of their trusted homeopathic practitioners. Her extensive NHS career as a registered nurse and health visitor has shaped her intuitive approach to homeopathy, blending conventional medicine and holistic care. A dedicated educator, Maggie has lectured at the Centre for Homeopathic Education, CHE, for over 20 years and has taught at other UK colleges, as well as running her own seminars in New York. She's passionate about the role of clinical experience in developing homeopathic expertise, believing that evidence from being in practice must be at the heart of all homeopathy teaching. Maggie's greatest joy is rooted in her clinical work and sharing her experience with the many students she teaches and mentors. I'd like to welcome you, Maggie.
Thank you. Hi, Marcus. Very nice to be here.
Very good. And we were just talking before we came on. We were at the graduation, CHE 2026 graduation last night. And it was an amazing event, wasn't it?
It was fabulous. Really amazing. It never ceases to amaze me how in the moment those things are. We've both been to graduation ceremonies for, well, at this point, decades, but actually nothing is ever like the one you're at.
Absolutely.
It's always like the first time. I mean, last night particularly was pretty emotional. It was pretty overwhelming.
Yeah.
Felt so incredibly proud of their dedication and hard work and commitment. It was really something. It was, more than I had expected.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. It always is. It's always a reminder because it always reminds us of our graduation.
Exactly.
And, it was great. I mean, we had, I think it was under 75 people graduated from all around the world. And what's amazing, isn't that it's the classroom, it's the online course, fast track, part-time. And I'm so amazed that all the online students, majority of them come from all different parts of the world just to share that graduation experience.
Yeah.
It's phenomenal.
Yeah, and it was a particularly special graduation. And I think perhaps something we're reminded of in homeopathy is that we are not a recorded event. We're a live event anyway. We are in our practices. We are certainly in teaching. And for me, it's always a live show. Every time you see a patient, it's an experience that you haven't heard before. You may even know the patient, have been seeing them for a while, but every time you see them in that encounter, you have that opportunity to be in their space as it is now and in the moment. I think that's incredibly important. Yeah. So why would graduation be any different? These are graduates of 2026 and they are unique in their own way as the graduates before them have been,
Yeah. No, totally. And I think you're right. It's like what you said then about cases and being a homeopath. I mean, that's what I love about it. Every single case is different. You can have people coming in with the same issue, same pathology, but actually
exactly.
their story, everybody's story is different of how they got there. And that's why I just find it so fun. Well, I just love it because I just find it interesting. I love people's stories. I love how people have got to where they've got to, things that challenges they've overcome or not overcome. And I think it's a very special thing being a practitioner and being a homeopath and, that feeling that connection, I think. And which we felt last night. I mean, everybody felt connected in the room and that's why people come.
Well, that's the sort of, that's the unifying kind of connector, isn't it? The fact that we are homeopaths and we understand how complex life is at one level, but at another level, how simple it is. It's kind of the human experience is one we all share.
Yeah.
And I think watching the graduates last year reminded me that, we're all just further down the line than they are.
Mm.
And we all had the same, sense of wonderment, sense of hopefully still have it. I certainly have it. I think that grows, doesn't it, with time and experience.
Absolutely.
But, when you're graduating and you have that moment, I mean, lots of students said to me last night, I just can't believe I'm here. I never thought I'd get here. I never thought that this one particularly, so I said, why did you ever think that? We never thought that about you. And she said, I don't know, it's really weird, but I just never thought I'd be here. So I think quite a lot of them were sort of slightly in their own, shock that they'd actually made it, that they'd got through all those, all those assignments. Because it's it's not lightweight, is it? The training by any means.
Not at all.
They have to go through quite a lot of rigorous assessment, assignments.
I think just back to what you're saying about when you're studying homeopathy, and you want a rigorous training academically, clinically, because it's a profession, isn't it? And you look at any other sort of profession, there has to be rigor there somewhere. And I think actually some of the graduates saying last night that, sometimes it was tough going, as you said, with some assignments because it's challenging you, isn't it? It's getting you to critically think, to think deeply, to articulate what your knowledge or your understanding is. But when you do that, you then get a deeper level of a connection or understanding of what you're learning. It's like we throw the ball to them in the lectures and they throw the ball back with the assessment.
Yeah, exactly. But, I think something more subtle goes on too, Marcus. I think that it's actually experiencing vulnerability. So a lot of these assignments and what looks like testing kind of parts of the course can feel as if you're kind of under the spotlight. You're being looked at, you're being observed. And I often think, well, we're observing patients. We ask patients to give a lot of their own vulnerability to us when we are trying to kind of understand where they, how they got to the place that they're in when they come to see us. And I do feel that in terms of training, we have developing self-awareness, having a much better relationship with who you are rather than who you think you are is critical. Because otherwise what you're doing is you're having an experience with somebody which is essentially your experience and not theirs. It's often quite difficult to put that into words, but I mean, I think that the common word would be projection. But actually it's about being able to stand aside and allow that person the space to, slowly share and unravel what's gone on before they came to see you. And I think the training is a really important experience of self-discovery for students. And I think unless you're being observed in some way, if you're just a passive attendant, how do you do that?
That's a really good point, actually, isn't it? It's a really good point.
I think so. I mean, I think
perspective,
I think certainly when, with students I supervise are getting in a bit of a tears about an assignment or something they've got to do, I just say, look, it's part of self-discovery. It's part of understanding what it is about you that finds this challenging.
Yeah.
Because finding a way to have a better relationship with that so that you can work alongside it, perhaps even overcome it, work in process, call it what you like.
Yeah.
But it's all about ways of evolving your practice. We call it, don't we? We have a module, professional and personal development. And it's central to the training.
Absolutely.
To develop a better understanding of how you engage and interact with the world. We all think that we know ourselves. We all think we've got a really good idea of who we are. Well, I'm in my mid-60s. I'm still learning who I am. I'm still discovering things that I think, I thought I'd crack that. I thought that I was, thought I was further down the track. And I think in your practice, you're going to come across those challenges.
Absolutely.
For as long as you're in practice. It doesn't matter how long you've been in practice. It doesn't matter how well known you are. I think I hope most practitioners would agree, if you practice some degree of humility, it's not going to be, every day is going to be at some level a challenge.
Yeah.
Whether you think the case you've got is too complex, too deep, too difficult, whether you think that you're not going to be able to communicate well enough, the need to, to attend regularly, whether you don't feel you're confident enough to even attract people, all those things.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just things pulled out of the hat, if you like, but they are challenges that people have to live with when they're practicing. So if you've had an experience of being challenged when you're in practice, when you're training,
yes,
it at least sets you up. And also that you shared that with your peers.
Absolutely.
Because they really enjoy that. We've done reflective sessions today, and I say, who's brave enough to tell, to ask the question no one else wants to ask? And somebody sort of says it all to give some feedback about how you've been finding some of the challenges. And I would say without exception, and I said, did anybody else feel like, and then the hands go up, and there's this kind of like, not personal.
No, exactly. Well, and that a quote, I love this quote, we don't see how things are, we see things as we are.
Yes.
And that's really the nub of it. And it's just like saying, talking to graduates, because we do a closing circle with all the graduates. So we do an open circle when we first start, and we do a closing circle. And I always say, in the opening circle, like it could be 4 years ago or 2 years if on the fast track, the person that starts this is not the person that finishes it. And there'll be a huge, you're here to really to change yourself. And it's only when we do the closing circle, people will say, I remember when you said that, and I thought, what's he talking about? I'm all sorted.
Yeah.
People say, I am the completely different person. Because I said, this is about you. This was always about you. This was always about your transformation. Because if we know who we are, then you can help other people
exactly
see who they are. But we have to go through some kind of internal process. I think that Native Americans say to be a medicine man and woman, you have to be smashed into 1,000 pieces and put back together again.
Wow.
It's like you've got to know thyself, isn't it? It's like we've got to know who we are. And the easiest thing in the world to do is do a course or a program or a training with no assessments or assignments. Because you're not being challenged. It's like everybody loves each other. Everything's great. You're great. I'm great. Let's all say we're great. And then you go out into the outside world, but nothing's really internally changed. But this is why I always talk about becoming a homeopath. When I do an open day, it's like we become a homeopath, isn't it? It's a becoming.
Yeah. And it's also a lifelong journey.
Absolutely.
The becoming is an ongoing it's an ongoing process. Yeah. And we continue, hopefully, to adapt throughout our journeys. I mean, I'm in my mid-60s. I didn't think I'd still be practicing, but because that process is still ongoing, it feels as if it is kind of part of who I am. It's part of my life in the same way my family are part of my life.
Absolutely.
It's part of my spiritual life. It's part of my joy. It's a big part of my joy. So, yeah, I think it's really important to embrace homeopathy as a lifelong learning and not something where you're just gathering information. Everybody gets overwhelmed by the gathering information. Have I bought enough books? Do I know enough remedies? Have I done enough studying? And I kind of say, until you actually, until you are in the very early stage, that peace with yourself.
Yeah.
That you accept that actually what you've embarked upon is probably a lot bigger than you thought it was.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, I don't know if you remember back in the day, we used to talk about the Matrix, the red buttons.
Yeah.
And really that, I've been in the conventional system. I was a nurse, I was loved by most people, respected by most people, and felt that, that I was a sort of given, really. I mean, it was a great backdrop for my homeopathic.
Actually, can we talk about that, Maggie? Can we talk
Sure.
about, so how did you get into homeopathy? The question I always like to ask people, where did it all start for you?
Well, I suppose that at some level there were hints of it in my childhood. It's, it's like when you're joining the dots. I didn't know that I was already being at some level nurtured into homeopathy in my family. My mother was very much, you don't really need anything, you'll be all right, whatever it was. And we still had childhood illnesses, remember. I'm in a big family, we all had measles. Yeah. And in fact, my mother forced us all to have measles. She was, which one hasn't had measles? So, and
chickenpox and the whole thing, yeah.
Chickenpox, mumps, yeah, German measles. And we regularly got, fevers, and but illness wasn't a thing. It was just an experience that every other child had. So it wasn't dramatized and it wasn't a big deal. And it doesn't mean that I don't recognize that there are complications with some illnesses. But for the most part, we grew up with a sense that we had what we needed within us and you'll be all right. So there was that. I think then during my nursing experience, one of the things that really struck me, and I've said it on many occasions, is that patients lost themselves to a diagnosis. They lost themselves. They weren't called by their names. They were called by their diagnosis. And often over the nurse, not often, it was common practice in those days to have the surgeon's name over the bed. And they were in a ward that was a bespoke ward for their particular condition. And it was there where I saw difference. So I remember being in a ward where lots of patients had at that time multiple sclerosis. And there was the sort of multiple sclerosis, the MS personality. And I recognized there wasn't actually. They were all quite different. And that was already an awakening. I was thinking, that's really strange. That person quite different to that person, but they've both got the same diagnosis. And then we'd go into, in those days, we used to do blocks of study. So you'd be on the wards for 8 or 9 weeks, and then you'd go into a block for 3 or 4 weeks and you'd learn about the next system. And then you go on to a ward, if you were lucky and it joined up, where you would actually have an experience of what that condition represented. And of course it never did. And I used to get so frustrated. I was just thinking, oh no, that doesn't fit that. I kind of wanted to fit them into what I'd learned. And the parallel universe with that is we do it with remedies, don't we?
Yeah.
Well, they're not really. They don't look like a calc, because they don't look like a calc.
Got me postulated. She's not weepy.
Yeah, or whatever it is. That when we learn the depth, that's why I love the polycrest so much, because that's a lifelong learning too. Those extraordinary remedies that have survived since Hahnemann's time have depth and breadth, which I'm still discovering.
Exactly.
But back to the nursing. So those things were there, and just this feeling that the sort of the lack of personal attention, that nobody really kind of stopped to consider what impact that was having on a human being. And sometimes, I certainly as a nurse used to say, do you know what your operation is? I worked in a surgical ward in my early career. And they'd say, well, I didn't really like to ask. We think they know what they're doing. And you think, well, you're going to have you're going to be under a general anesthetic tomorrow for maybe 3 or 4 hours, having major abdominal surgery, and you've no idea what's going to happen.
Crazy. In
the same way that people don't ever ask what's in the drugs. Anyway, that continued. And then I had a spell out. I did a philosophy degree. I went and lived in Italy for a couple of years. I came back, and, the time, the only job I get back in nursing, I was going to retrain as a teacher. But anyway, I ended up back into nursing. And then I retrained as a health visitor when I was pregnant with our oldest daughter, because it was a 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. It's one of them. But also because I was thinking, I want to see where it all starts. Anyway, I really loved that training, and I really loved that. That was the last kind of, if you like, that was the last chapter in my nursing career. But what was really brilliant, and specifically brilliant about it, is that it wasn't, you weren't dealing with sick people ostensibly. You were dealing with healthy children. We were observers of healthy development. But intrinsically, it became a diagnosis process. So children who were going through ordinary, experiences, developing their immune systems, having the sort of things that we had as kids, the coughs and the colds, the bit of a rash here, the bit of a tummy upset, were suddenly being given quite heavy diagnosis. And they were being medicated. And that began to really get under my skin. To say nothing of this idea, certainly one of the principles in health visiting was to empower families to make informed choices. Well, that never really happened. The schedules came out, the vaccines came out. I don't have a, hard and fast view on vaccines. I personally choose not to, but I'm respectful of other people's choices and the way that they come to the decisions they need to in their own families.
As
But
long
I
as it's
would ask,
like I said, as long as it's an informed,
as long as it's an informed choice.
Exactly.
So I'd ask a question about, have you thought about the vaccines? And they'd say, well, do you do it? Or does the doctor do it? Or does the practice nurse do it? I said, no, that wasn't the question.
Mm.
Have you thought about whether you want to vaccinate your child? And they'd be a little bit, what do you mean whether I want to? I said, well, it is a choice. You have to give consent.
Yeah, just for people listening, so I know people listen from all different parts of the world. In the UK, it's not mandatory to be vaccinated, or to get into schools, you don't mandatory have to be vaccinated.
Yes. I mean, it can be, can't it, Marcus? It's not. But anyway, the point was I wanted parents, outside all of that kind of discussion, I wanted parents to be able to recognize that there was something that was going to be offered to their child that they needed to give consent to, and that they need to think about it. So in those days, I'd send them off to the informed parent. I said, look, it's not for me to decide. It's not. But I think, anything that happens to your child happens under your governance. And so that was one thing. And then a friend of mine just said, I'm going to this homeopathy first aid thing. And my friend, who's a clinical coordinator, was a kind of like nurse manager, has just done this training. And I said, oh, it's not for me, really, no. I don't think that would work for me. It sounds a bit sort of I didn't say lightweight. It just felt a bit like, for people who've, maybe a bit neurotic about their health or something. I'm sort of busy in the real world, Anyway, I did go along with her, and I said, well, if you're going to go and we can go together and have a bit of a night out together, I'll come with you.
Was it like was it a one-day workshop or an evening class?
It was I did the same when I qualified. We didn't have online in those days, did we? So I went off to this evening course, and I'd say within 15 minutes, when she started talking about what homeopathy was, it was sort of like fireworks. I was just, and all these dots that I never joined.
Yeah. So what was it that she said? What was it that was said those first 15 minutes that joined the dots?
She just said homeopathy is about treating the person. It's the person that gets sick. And homeopathy is the holistic system, holistic system of medicine that looks at the suffering under a personal lens. It looks at the person and understands the suffering through the person who's suffering. And they weren't her exact words, but that it was a person-centered therapy that recognized that illness started with the vulnerability, the susceptibility, the individuality, the uniqueness of the person who was going through whatever they were going through. Yeah. Now, that may not sound like rocket science to anybody who's already in that space, but for me, who'd come from a nursing background, everything was conditioned to a sort of a label. Yes. And I knew that wasn't okay, but I didn't know there was another dialogue. I didn't know, I wasn't raised in it. I'm sure my mother, certainly when I trained, was really enthusiastic, but my dad had died. I think he would have been, my dad was a dentist. I think he would have really, really approved had he been alive to see me do my training, which would have been really lovely. Yeah, it was a light bulb. It was a bit one of those kind of moments of, this is what I've been looking for that I've never found. And it made sense of everything else. It made sense of why I'd studied philosophy. I've always asked, why are we here? What's the meaning of life? Where are we placed in it? Why am I who I am? All those questions. And I did existential phenomenology. I did kind of the inquiry into, what does it mean to be alive and all those things. And in homeopathy, I found a way to relate to life, which has continued for the last 30 years, really. And it really was like that. Once I had been on that, it was the first night, I obviously went back for the rest of those 5 weeks. And 3 months later, I was at the infamous Robert Davis College. I didn't even look around. I just said to this gorgeous homeopathy where I started seeing Joe Davidson days. And no, she wasn't Joe Davidson.
No, Joe Percival.
Joe Percival. So,
Robert Davidson.
I've got Robert Davidson. Joe Percival, yeah. So I went to see Joe Percival. She was fabulous. She really was a fabulous homeopath. And that was that really. 3 months later, I was at Robert Davidson's College of Practical Homeopathy. And that's where I've been I haven't been at Robert Davidson's, but I've been in homeopathy ever since.
Yeah. Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, it's such a familiar story. I've said this before in other podcasts, that it's every homeopath has a story. And it's like I always say, you don't decide to get into homeopathy, it pulls you in when the time is right. And those moments, you may not think you're looking for it, but it's looking for you. And in fact, it's been calling you for quite a while. And then at some point, like you said, the penny just drops, doesn't it? It's like it's a bolt out of the blue. And some people have that with a remedy, taking the remedy for the first time or whatever it is. But anybody that really trains often as a homeopath, they have some kind of story where they felt it being pulled in. And I've had it on open days when I've done virtual open days online. This one lady said she was listening to me to the open day on her phone in a motel in Iowa. And she said, when you said about homeopathy calls you don't decide to get into it. She said, it's just bursting into tears. It's been calling her whole life, and she realized she had to do it. She had to train. And I think it's whether you listen to that or not, isn't it? And
yeah, well, I think it's an invitation to be yourself in a way that you never were before. I mean, it's an ongoing process. I think that thing about, the adapting principle, the difference, the fundamental difference between homeopathy and conventional medicine is that we are work in process. We are always adapting throughout our lives but we didn't realize maybe we were. Things get factored, don't they, in terms of conventional wisdom. This is a fact. And I think, what's a fact? Facts are learning in process. So what's a fact today is a myth tomorrow, or it's been disproven, whatever, all those processes are.
Especially medicine, Maggie, because you always say in medical, it's like, well, we used to know this, but now we know that.
Exactly.
Whereas with homeopathy, there's principles. It's like cures. It's a principle. Principles don't change. Where the principles in medicine necessarily, there's not really those principles.
There aren't there, are they?
No.
But I think the adapting principle is one that's really, really important because, you kind of adapt to being in a much better relationship with yourself, hopefully, a much more honest relationship with yourself. And that's what we're sort of inviting our patients to do, isn't it? That's why the whole process of being in a therapeutic relationship where your treatment is being determined by a relationship you have with somebody who is taking you on that journey.
Yeah.
Who is allowing you in this very fast world where we have, a solution before you've even thought about it. We have a product in front of us that we've bought before we've even thought about whether we want it, or a suggestion to buy it because we've been picked up by algorithms. There's something really lovely about the ever, if you like, that constant in homeopathy, which is that it's a therapeutically led practice.
Yeah.
You're sitting with patients and you're, helping them make sense of their journey back to being whole again.
Yeah. Back to themselves. Yeah.
Back to themselves, back to a place where they are more able to manage being independent from whatever they've been dependent on, whether that was a drug, whether that was some people get attached to their labels,
Absolutely.
I don't take that away from me because, I will feel very vulnerable if I don't have that label.
No, exactly. And I think we just mentioned about Robert Davison, who also I train with, and I've mentioned him many, many times. He would often say, when you take a remedy, it takes you back to the position where you can decide again. And the decision, either you hold on or you let go, don't you? You either hold on or you let go. And I think that's about, finding out that reconnection to who we are.
Yeah, I think that part is rather complex, because we all have, adapting thoughts and feelings. One day we're up, one day we're down. You look at the kind of the lovely work that Taryn does with with the monthly cycle. You have, 2 weeks of feeling that you're on top of the world, and 2 days of feeling that you're going to be hidden from the world.
Yeah.
All the ups and downs, things that we can't really know. One of the things I've been contemplating a lot recently and sharing with my patients is the freedom of uncertainty rather than the fear of it. The uncertainty is true. None of us can predict.
No.
In certain parts of the world, it's very evident. We perhaps live in a part of the world where it feels as if when you get up in the morning, you can probably get to the end of the day without some major catastrophe happening in the middle of you. Yeah. Things like that. But I think uncertainty is a very helpful way of saying, with your patient, it's a journey of reaching a point where they get to that feeling that they know they're all right to do it on their own. And also, I'm sure you would share with me that, some of those patients are with you for years.
Yeah.
Some of them are with you for a month. Some of them are just for 2 or 3 appointments. All of that is part and parcel of being in practice. I think that variety, and I think that letting go of knowing, that's a big one for me. stop knowing, stop,
Yeah. It's, and I think, and I've reflected on this. I did an interview with Tony Hurley, who's been practicing 50 odd years. And we were both talking about that. Actually, as you've gone on in practice, you get, I think, this more simple in the way that you see things. Like I said, you let go, you become, in a consultation, I feel more empty. You come in a place of neutrality, which Hahnemann talks about in the first aphorism, be the unprejudiced observer, or, what it's like, to me, that's about neutrality. And it's being
totally.
that almost like an empty vessel. I mean, it's very Zen, isn't it? Very Buddhist.
Yeah. I think the longer you're in practice, the more you realize that we only know in part.
Yes. Exactly.
Socrates said, I don't know anything. So you get to the point where you trip out of having to know. I think in the early days, you're sort of like, I've read it all. I've done it all. I think you can cultivate, I think that's not the right way to say it, but you do drop down.
Yes, definitely.
You do drop down into a place of saying, come on, what's really, and I think that resonant state is transmitted. I feel it when I'm with patients. I can sometimes feel, I know when I used to go when I was a doula and I went to birth, and I could see when the mother had, was in labor and she dropped into her own Zen state. You'd see this wonderful sort of, and then that was it really. It was just then hands off and just be around so that you can give remedies as and when you need to, but mostly you're observing. And I think we can get very caught up in our need to know at the cost of observing.
Totally. And what I would say, you can't think and listen at the same time. To truly listen is to be present, isn't it? And as you said, you drop out of here, out of the head, into much more into here, into the heart. It's like you go into that, and we've talked about it before, Maggie, that space in between, as in that quote by Rumi, beyond wrong thinking and right thinking, there's a field, I'll meet you there. It's that space, isn't it? It's that, which is an easy space to be in, I feel. But also the person opposite you in the consultation also will drop into that space.
Yeah. Because it mirrors, doesn't it?
Because it mirrors.
Pulls them in. Yeah. And without that, I don't know, that's such an essential quality for me that, homeopathy is, you could call it the listening practice. It is about listening. It is about being still enough to hear beyond your noise what is happening. Because it is a privilege. It is a privilege to sit with somebody's intimacy, with somebody's trust, with somebody's vulnerability. It is a privilege. And a lot of the time, that privilege is overlooked by the anxiety of getting it right and certainty.
And also just it's all about the remedy. Of course, the remedy is important, but it's the key to the lock, isn't it? It's the key. I always use that analogy, even though I'm not into cars. And somebody asked me the other day, that's another car analogy you've used. It's a key to the lock, isn't it? You have the key. The key in itself, like the remedy, is not powerful within itself. The key to the car is not powerful, but the interaction and the ignition, you turn it and the engine roars, which we call the vital force, or qi in Chinese medicine, or prana in Ayurveda. That power is innate. The innate health is within all of us.
Exactly. It's not yours. It's theirs anyway.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
And I think
that's an opposite view of allopathic medicine, where the power's in the drug.
Yeah. Well, it's understandable, isn't it, that students and practitioners will start to relate to, of course, remedies in the way that we have previously related to drugs. That remedy. Now, we all know there are remedies. For me, pulsatilla probably sits head and shoulders because I love my relationship with that remedy. But in itself, it isn't anything.
No.
It's the relationship it has to the resonance that you discover when you're in a consultation with somebody that is then reflected in what your treatment. So it all becomes part. The lovely thing is that, what was it then? Was it that remedy? Was it that aha moment I had when I was with you in a consultation? And I said, well, it's probably a bit of all of it. But the relationship is so fundamental. I think it's so important to really remember that the practitioner is fundamental as the holding space.
Absolutely.
Because otherwise you are just kind of like picking a remedy out of a box and saying, well, let's see how this one goes, which I've got no problem with.
Like I said, and it works. But I think, it works in therapeutics.
We all did it. We did first aid courses. We all,
because it works.
We encourage people to be,
But I think it's different levels of healing. What you're talking about, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, is that deeper healing that can go on. That really deeper healing.
Yeah.
And like you said, there's all different levels. There's all different levels of healing. And you're talking about deep healing here on a deeper level. Because like you said, you can take remedies, things come, they go, they come back again, they go. It can be like, it's like something's not quite being dealt with. And that's when you talk about we go to a deeper level of healing, or something like I said, trauma, or it's just deeper.
Well, that's one of the nice things, isn't it? Because I don't know exactly what the quote is, but that a chronic case is an unresolved acute case.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
So I quite like that. And I love the idea that, an acute remedy is the window in, because often it's the sort of, people will be in denial. We were talking with the fourth years on Saturday about how, you think, the big aha remedy, you give somebody a remedy and it changes their life, it's going to change them. It doesn't. I can remember that was one of my APIS cases, which I've shared, is that treating this guy in Italy with APIS after being stung by, pulled out tuber and pulled out a wasp nest with it, and ended up having that almost like cartoon ear, and said, arnica.
He got stung by
multiple times here.
Right.
And the previous year, his partner had something similar happened, and we'd used APIS that year. So I came this particular holiday. I came with a pack in case anything happened. And I said to him, look, could you just trust me to be with you and to sit with you? So this is another interesting thing, because I sat with him all night.
Yeah.
We stayed up all night. I said, if I'm worried about you at any moment, I promise you, I will take you to the hospital, because I don't want anything to happen to you that I'm rest assured, you don't have to worry. If I'm worried, I'll take you to the hospital.
Yeah.
But just stay with it. Stay with me.
And so you give him the remedies?
I gave him the remedies. I gave him some, APIS was the main remedy, but I gave him belladonna, I gave him chamomilla, I gave him calendula.
Yeah.
Gave him all sorts of things, and basically stayed with him, held him, and stayed with him all night. And in the morning, he was completely recovered. And I said, do you fancy going? Do you want to go to the hospital now just to be on the safe side? He said, absolutely not. No, it's fantastic. Thank you. You were very good friends. But did that convert him to homeopathy? Absolutely not. So, it didn't matter for me. It doesn't matter, because that experience was a really brilliant experience, again, of holding. Sometimes when I was in early practice, Marcus, I actually used to go to patients' houses when babies were having fevers, and I'd like, I'll sit with you. I'll sit with you with the fever. I'll demonstrate to you how belladonna works, because I think there is this relation with homeopathy. Is not, it should be about connection. It's about human beings connecting to each other and using the conduit of remedies to wake up consciousness into, you are much more capable than you think you are. That's the main message, isn't it?
Absolutely. 100%.
You are much, much more capable in every respect. You're capable of dealing with some of these acute situations. You're capable of dealing with, things that happen to you that you feel you can't manage. And we get dumbed down, don't we? We get pushed into a place of feeling that we just kind of have to shut up and put up and do as we're told by people who are often strangers.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the other thing.
Yeah, and I think that's true, especially with a lot of allopathic medicine. It's very disempowering, isn't it? It's like taking the power away. We have the knowledge. You just take this, don't ask any questions, and everything be fine. Whereas with homeopathy, I feel we're walking alongside people. Again,
we are, absolutely, yeah.
I was saying this to one of the groups, this college weekend teaching, that, part of our job is also education. Like you said, the allopathic model is so strong, so powerful, that we're so used to it. Even homeopaths start thinking in those ways. But we're not dealing with that. We're dealing with homeopathy. It is different. So like you said, that fever, that cough, that cold, it's just reframing it and having a different paradigm about what is health and what is sickness.
Exactly.
This can be a good thing, and we need to encourage that, or we need to help it along.
Exactly.
The body knows what to do.
And in early years, it's about learning the tricks of the brain. It's, the reason you go through those experiences as a child is to equip you with your immune system with invaluable lessons for life.
Actually, can I ask you a question? I mean, being
a
health visitor with vast experience, what I used to see, and remember I used to run a mother and baby clinic in Islington and in London. And I remember, so many times before I had kids, parents would come back after the child had had a fever or some kind of acute, where they would make a developmental leap.
Yes.
Either they would start to speak, they would start walking, they would start crawling. And it was like, oh God, is this right? Is this, am I seeing this right? And then I saw it with my own kids. It was like, oh my goodness. So they do a raging fever all night. and then
Exactly.
wake up the next morning, and then all of a sudden they're starting to crawl or something's changed.
Well, it's like firing up the boiler.
Yeah.
You think about, you need energy to grow things that you haven't got. It takes an enormous, if you think of a rocket going off to the moon, it needs an enormous, and it's quite a sort of useful image that often when children are about to go into a surge, they need a real energy boost. And that energy boost will sometimes come in the form of some inflammation. So the susceptibility in childhood is very different to the weakness and vulnerability in an adult life, where that susceptibility is by being perhaps having a weakened immune system. It's quite the opposite in children.
It is.
Children, it's about, and even sometimes when they react really heavily to a vaccine, it's again an attempt for the body to take back some level of defense. So it's kind of building up a protective layer. And I think empowering people to know that, even when there's a sort of, what's the great Tom Hanks, this too shall pass. Tom Hanks quote. It's not his, it's come from.
No. It's quite a famous quote.
Yeah. But it is lovely. It is lovely when you've sort of seen that storm, that the quiet comes. And then I think parents are often unaware of the growth. So it's a really important part of, I think.
Well, because I think it's, we've been cut off from, look, our grandmothers used to know, our great grandmothers knew what to do with the coughs, the colds. You talked about your mum. It's like they knew how to deal with it. They weren't afraid of it. They'd seen it. Whereas now we seem to be cut off from that. And so therefore people jump into the place of fear, because I think a lot of the time it's always the worst case scenario that could happen. And that's often quite a rare scenario, but that's what people hear, don't they? So they just people freak out by a cold mucus.
That's right. And often it's done, to be fair to the health service and the health providers, it's kind of about, we want to minimize any fallout. And often that's kind of protocol. That, it's the worst case scenario for everybody. Give you this just in case. And often they don't have the freedom to do other things. It's not always, they don't always have the choice. And I think that's quite a tricky one. But, unless we are given the opportunity in childhood to develop our own independent immune systems, we're going to be really compromised.
Absolutely.
That's kind of where it all starts. But I think the more we gain independence of our health physically, that's going to have a knock-on effect emotionally. That's going to have and often as we get into more complex kind of health issues, we know that quite a lot of our physical suffering is actually coming from a deeper mental and emotional suffering. And when that light bulb's turned on, that's very exciting. That for me is the most meaningful part of practice, really. If you've been able to share a journey with someone where they're able to come back to being who they are in their kind of fundamental, that's not the right way to describe it. When somebody's kind of coming back to being themselves, they got lost in the journey of being many adapted things that were not for their best intention, but for surviving whatever scenario they were in.
But not living the truth of who they are.
But not living the truth of their own lives. And that's, that it's exciting. It's uplifting. It sounds heavy, but it's not heavy.
No.
But I think the thing I'd come back to time and time again, it is the relationship they have to homeopathy rather than the objective choosing a remedy that's, we have lots of ways of doing that. But as practitioners, if we're going to train to be practitioners, I think that's what we have to learn in a very, I don't know what the word I would say, it has to be central to the training.
Absolutely.
This is a journey of self-discovery. This is a journey that you're going on so that you can get back to being the best of who you were and the best of who you are.
So you can help other people be who they are, who they truly are. And
because that's resonance, isn't it? That is like for like. Unless you've done the work, you're going to bump into all. I think that is what happens. I think that was taught very early on for us. I didn't really believe it at the time. I was like, oh, come on. That whatever happens to you at some level, you've kind of at some level resonated with it. Yeah. Well, I think to some extent that's true. That doesn't mean we can't be compassionate because, when life knocks you back a bit, it's hard. Yeah. So being compassionate to that, but actually also being empowering, always being able to see yourself in whatever's going on is really empowering.
Absolutely. Totally.
Takes out the victim, doesn't it? It takes out and we're not, that's kind of part of being homeopaths, isn't it? We're trying to get people out of that victim space, being victim to a diagnosis, to a prognosis.
And just to see it as a state, these are often survival strategies, isn't it?
Exactly. I'm just trying to remember a book that I read about a woman who had advanced pancreatic cancer, who had been told by the doctor she got 3 months to live. And she decided that wasn't going to be her life. She was in her early 60s. She said, I've kind of worked all my life. I want my retirement. They were real sort of, outward bounders, walked a lot, hiked a lot, traveled a lot. Anyway, cut a long story short, she eventually came to a place after many treatment when she recognized that there was no scientific evidence for prognosis. That prognosis was something that was a guesstimate.
Yeah.
That it was based on, the last person, we talked about individuality, that they've seen a number of people who haven't made it beyond 3 or 4 months with a similar pathology. Anyway, she took on what she called her guides, and they included a very brilliant homeopath up in Richmond in North Yorkshire. And she made an incredible journey back to recovery.
Wow.
But one of the things she said is that you have to be the own author of your healing. You have to make the decisions about who is going to be in your healing camp. And anybody who didn't believe that she was going to make a full recovery was no longer in her camp. So we sometimes have to make that was really challenging for her, because she had to let go of some people who were she'd been lifelong friends with, some people in her family.
But in a way, a life depended on it. I mean, and that is a serious pathology.
Yeah, I mean, pancreatic cancer is
pathology.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people do feel that they're so overwhelmed with the diagnosis and the prognosis. Prognosis often being the worst of two.
Yeah.
That's really helped me through my practice to remind people that prognosis is not a given.
It's certainly not definitive. Like I said, it's a guesstimate. But people will pass away, and you would have seen it in the hospital, will pass away to the date that they've been given of the prognosis. It's like a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah.
I mean, the spoken words.
Yeah, I mean, this is the power of the diagnosis too, isn't it? I mean, we've had loads of stories about misdiagnosis. You get a diagnosis that you...
Well, I mean, one of the things that, especially when people get diagnosis, the first thing I deal with is the shock. Often the shock. You need, as a homeopath, I feel you need to deal with the shock first before you even get into the case, because often that ailment, what we call in homeopathy, ailments from bad news. It's a huge one. Huge thing. I remember talking to Robin Murphy about this. He would say that is the number one thing he deals with first of all.
And you feel very powerless. You feel like,
very powerless.
I've got no power. I've got no...
something's been taken away. It's out of my hands.
I've got no rights in this. I'm not allowed to sort of take... So hers was a long... I think she would probably have been in treatment for over a year by the time she had this kind of wake-up call to, I have some choices here.
Yeah.
And one of them is to reject the idea that a prognosis is relevant to me.
Exactly.
Or that I have to take any... That in itself, I think, was probably the biggest turning point for her.
Absolutely. Amazing story.
And very inspiring for us, I think.
Oh, totally. Well, it also reminds me of that book, Dying to Be Me.
Oh, Muna.
Yeah. Anita Murajani.
That's right. Yeah.
Great book. For anybody listening, if you've read that book, Dying to Be Me, it's an amazing story of this lady. I mean, they give her hours to live. I mean, it's an incredible story. I would say everybody check her out, YouTube or book. Her book's amazing. So yeah, I mean that's the thing, isn't it? There's some incredible stories of where people have turned things around against all the odds, and so there's always hope. That's why I always say there's always hope. Hope's the greatest thing I think we can ever have. There's always hope. Yeah. There's always light. There's always
and it's bringing it into a working process, isn't it? Because I think sometimes people can also feel overwhelmed with the idea that they can get better. It's like, whoa. So I think it's all about the gentle process by which you bring somebody back into an empowered kind of...
Yeah, well, it's just reconnecting to that innate health that we all have, that actually often all that healing wisdom is within us. We do have it. That's what homeopathy does. It's tapping into that.
It wakes up that.
Yeah, or acupuncture. When it's like it's the same thing. It's waking up that life force within us that we all have, that we're born with and we have throughout our life. And that's what leaves when we pass. It's like it's there. It's like a conductor of an orchestra. It's trying to make sure the music is all flowing it's a dance, it's a rhythm, isn't it? But sometimes we lose our step and it goes out of sync. And the job of, I feel like they said, the healing process is to get it back into that rhythm again.
Yeah. And it, involves things like, very profound things like trust. And
Absolutely.
that's quite, and again, the practitioner is the kind of, if you're the enabler of that, the trust is about somebody holding your hand, walking side by side, being part of your journey with you.
But also the practitioner has to also walk the talk. We have to. I said this at our Elevate conference. We have to be in walking the talk and be lighthouses. We have to demonstrate what we do. We have to be healthy and vital and these things, because I don't want to go and see somebody who's sicker than I am. I want to go and see somebody who's a lot healthier than I if I'm ill. So I think we've got to embody what we do. We have to embody it. And then I think people also feel that certainty within you because you're doing it. You've walked it. You've been through things. You've dealt with things. Whatever it is, you've been on that journey yourself. And that's what people, I feel, recognize.
Yeah. Well, I think that,
on a deeper level.
Yeah. I think that's that thing about being in community though, isn't it? It's like, you do need to share this with other people because it can sometimes feel terribly personal.
Absolutely.
And we just need to be reminded that at various times we're all going to go through things that many other people go through at other times or at the same time. And that's great about being in training together, that you are sharing those experiences with each other and developing a kind of just a deeper relationship to vulnerability. For me is such a critical part of that. Marcus, it's vulnerability is a superpower, but we're encouraged to believe it's kind of equivalent of failing. And it's a really important part of healing.
Absolutely.
And we need to kind of bring that back to a world that's become pretty harsh, really. It's,
Yeah, no, totally agree.
It's just a bit softer, a bit gentler, a bit kind.
I was going to say that. I was saying it the other day, why can't we just be a bit kinder to each other? Just a little bit more kindness would go a long way with us all, how we interact, how we do things.
We've got into the world's it's always been competitive. It's kind of part of human nature, but it feels as if it's got to a level that I find quite hard to relate to.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Maggie, it's been great talking to you. It's been really, really lovely. And actually, we start off talking about the graduation, don't we, and training and different things. And like I said, this is a very organic conversation, really. But if you had to give any advice to anybody listening now, today, to this podcast, who's thinking about, could I be a homeopath? Is it something I could do? What advice would you say to them? What advice would you give them if they were thinking that way? If they're thinking, I've always wanted to do this, or can I do this? Or is it something that I could do? I would love to, but I can't imagine myself doing it.
Well, I think the first thing I would come to is the thing that I was saying earlier on is what's stopping you then? What's your obstacle? What's kind of, what are you doubting? And if you're curious, go and find out more.
Yeah.
Go and find out who you can talk to, who can help you get more information, get more knowledge. But I kind of want to say, well, what's stopping you? What is it that's making you hesitant? Because they're the answers, aren't there? I mean, I was very lucky. For me, there was no hesitancy. Once it was there, it was, for a lot of people, it's sort of like, the doubt's already there.
Well, they say, don't they, 80% of people that go back into adult education, because often most people becoming a homeopath are often, either it's a change of career. 80% of the people that go back into adult education are processing their previous education experience as well. And,
yes,
doubt that comes up.
Yeah. So I think it's perhaps that if homeopathy is already landed in your awareness enough for you to have the curiosity, then follow that.
Yeah.
Don't let the doubt, don't let the reservation, because that's all part of something that's an old story. So, I would, go and seek it.
Yeah.
Find out more. Have a conversation with somebody.
Have the courage to follow your heart.
Yeah.
Have the courage to follow your heart.
But just be aware that there are lots of people who would be very happy to talk to you and give you some guidance on where to direct that curiosity.
Absolutely. Thank you, Maggie. It was a great conversation. And
you're welcome. Nice to talk.
And nice to talk. Always nice to talk. And thank you so much.
You're welcome.